sang this song to me. There was a message in its melody, sweetest lyrics that I ever heard. There's a message in the songs of birds. He said, tomorrow is another day, living is the only way tomorrow's gonna ever come. Listen to the words of the song. Everything's gonna be alright. Everything is gonna be
Good afternoon for all of those of you who have tuned in to us. This is going to be an incredibly exciting show. I know every show is, but this one is special. So I want you to get your questions ready because we are going to talk about dating. We're going to start off talking about dating in a pandemic, but I promise you we're going to talk about dating in general because there is just a lot of things that we need to learn to do and a lot of things we need to learn not to do. Of course, I'm Stephanie Wilson-Coleman, the Empowerment Doctor, and I want to welcome you to A Sip of Inspiration. Joining me is Jasmine Turner. She is the founder of Black Matchmade. She is actually a matchmaker, okay? And she's very good at it too. So I'm going to bring Jasmine. Tell us something about you. And of course, I've got 21 questions. So So how did you get started? Tell us about yourself and your background and how you got started.
Yeah, so one, thanks for having me on the show. This is my second time coming on to A Sip of Inspiration, and it's always a good fun time. So thanks for having me on because you don't have to. But a little about me, I am a professional matchmaker, and I'm really passionate about our community, and I believe family is the foundation. So the reason I became a matchmaker is because I wanted to help more people who look like me have healthy relationships that lead to ideally families. So that's why I decided to get into matchmaking.
Okay, so there are just a few ground rules for the people watching. In the chat box, several people are starting watch parties. So if you go to my page, Stephanie Wilson-Coleman, Empower DR, you will see it being started right now. If you put your questions in that box, there's someone out there who's literally going to text me the questions so that we can get them answered. And if we leave any unanswered, some of you know how to get in touch with me directly. Don't be shy, please do so. And afterwards, if there's some that we don't cover, we will make sure that we get you answers to that. So Jasmine is really serious about matchmaking too. I want just to tell you guys, and she's going to give you some really good advice. The first time we had her on the show, I was amazed at the amount of advice that she was giving and the amount of things and the way she even conducts the matches. So that was pretty cool to me. Normally when we hear about matchmaking, we hear about harmony or match or all of those, but it's nothing like, nothing like having somebody who's working for people who look like us, who want to be matched with people who look like us.
Yeah.
So my first question is, so how was your first match was you entered into this dating industry, into this relationship industry?
Oh, wow. Do I even remember my first match? I don't even think I remember who my first match was. That was so long ago, and I've had so many matches since then. Everything from speed dating to individual matches. But I will say this, I remember who I was as a matchmaker then. And I was very new in the industry and still really learning quite a bit as we're always learning. And I at the time, I wasn't matching based on the areas that were most important. I matched more on, the things that we think are important. So I hadn't quite learned about compatibility. I hadn't quite learned about how much that plays a role in whether a relationship lasts. And so they didn't pay the fees that my clients pay now, so they didn't get to pay the fees. Honestly, I don't remember. So that's something I'll have to think about, my very first match.
Oh, cool. I'm sure it'll come to you as we go through the rest of these questions, and you can just kind of share with that. But as you were talking, you mentioned something really interesting. And I know that was one of the questions we had for later is the difference between chemistry and compatibility. People are always talking about chemistry and they says, oh, we just didn't have the chemistry. I don't know if it's going to work. So what is the difference and which one is most important? So those of you who think you know the answer, put it in the chat box right now. And we'll see.
Yes, I want to hear what you guys have to say, what you think is most important. You know, what you said, Stephanie, is right. So many people put chemistry above everything, really. And one of my colleagues likes to call it the deception of chemistry because it's a feeling. It feels good and it draws us in. And we start to think this is what we want because it feels good. But in reality, you can have chemistry with someone of the same sex. You can have chemistry with someone of opposite sex. That doesn't mean that you're compatible with them or that you should be in a relationship. Chemistry doesn't necessarily have to do with a romantic relationship. It's just a nice connection that feels good. Compatibility is what tends to help relationships last longer. And I'm not saying that just because I think that. One of my colleagues, Paul Brunson, wrote in his book, It's Complicated, but It Doesn't Have to Be, that a study found that when a couple has 3 areas, morals, values, life goals, 4th area is some level of compatibility. When those areas are in play, the likelihood of that relationship lasting increases dramatically in comparison to those areas not being compatible. So you could have amazing chemistry with someone, but if the areas of morals, values, and life goals are not there, the relationship is going to have a more difficult time. Let me explain why, because I think, when I say morals and values, especially when I'm talking to clients or potential clients, I don't think people always really understand what I mean by that. So some examples from the morals and values perspective is religion, if that's important to you. Another one might be politics, if that's important to you, or another one might be gender roles, or even how much someone tips the server. The reason why these are important because when life happens in a relationship, and we all know that relationships tend to go through these phases, most relationships are not always going to be exciting and you're going to want to be around that person all the time. You can't wait to get home to that person. But chemistry then is gone. And then what do you have when you don't want to be around that person, right?
Right.
Other areas of importance are not there. But even when you're mad at the person and even when you don't even know if you still want this relationship, the things that are important to you, like your values, whether or not you go to church, are going to be in place because that person also agrees with those values. Whether or not they take out the trash is, going to be in place because you guys have the same beliefs around gender roles. So when life gets tough, you don't want to say, oh my God, I can't stand this person, because they're still doing the things that matter to you when it comes down to how you determine what's right and wrong and how you should live your life. And so compatibility is more about the things that really matter: morals, values, life goals, whereas chemistry is a really amazing feeling that comes and goes. And if you don't have that compatibility there, when it goes, the relationship goes too.
So how do you test for compatibility? How do you find out if you're compatible?
You have to ask questions. I think you have to, one, know your own areas of compatibility. One of the things that happens when I talk to my clients and I say, okay, I give them the same examples I just gave you guys.
Okay.
Morals, values, and religion, politics, gender roles. They start to mention, oh, well, I'm not really religious, I'm spiritual. Or I don't really care about gender roles. And I say, okay, tell me what matters to you. I'm just giving you examples of areas of compatibility, areas of morals and values. I'm just giving you those examples. But when it comes to you, when you determine what's right and wrong, when you determine the way a person should live their life, those are the areas that you should know about yourself. So religion might not be important to you, and that wouldn't be an area of compatibility for you because you might be open to dating someone of any religion. The same goes for gender roles, but maybe it's really important that a person is 100% honest all the time, and telling a little white lie is a deal breaker for you. You know, that's another area of where someone determines right and wrong. And it's important for us to know what areas are important to us so that when we meet someone, we're asking the right questions. We're not asking, do you like basketball or do you like to travel? Because, you know, it's cool to have someone that also enjoys basketball if you enjoy basketball, or someone that enjoys traveling, depending on how important that is to you. But what really matters is how they determine right and wrong.
I'm just thought about traveling. I don't know, and how they define travel could matter too, because some people's travel is visiting family, and other people's travel is going out of the country, and that could not be compatible.
That's an area. It's definitely an area. If it's really important to you, we were introducing a couple yesterday, and it was important for both of them that when they travel, they like to travel and relax versus travel and, like, you know, go and do a ton of things. You know, people travel differently. So it's not only about location, but it's also about what do you do when you travel? Do you want to relax and vacation, or do you want to go and visit every club and every bar and every restaurant and every scene and every site? And that could be a huge issue if you're one of those people that it's really big on how you travel and you only want to travel one way. Then that could be something that could be a deal breaker in a relationship.
Oh God, and I'd never thought about that before, because I like active vacations. I want to climb something, hike something, visit something that's been there a million years. Yeah, you know, I want to do all of that. So yeah, just staying around, relaxing. You're right. Could be an issue. Mm-hmm. So how does your dating service work? And then how do people get in touch with you in order to contact you about using your dating service? We want to make sure that people know how to reach you.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way my service works is my clients pay me, right? So that's and I'm basically a recruiter for my clients. Okay. One thing I share is I came from a recruiting background. So I worked in the recruiting industry, not necessarily in recruiting the entire time, but I worked for a career builder in the recruiting industry. And then I also went and worked in higher education and recruiting. So that was part of like using my experiences as a recruiter into matchmaking, because matchmaking is really just love recruiters. We're really just people who go and find others that our clients are compatible with. And it's my job to go out and find those people. So the way it works is once a client decides they're interested in working with me, they can book a consultation on my website, which is blackmatchmade.com. And then if we decide it's a good fit for both of us to work together. So they have to want to work with me, and I also have to want to work with them. Not because like they have a bad personality, but we're just not always a good fit, right? And so I want to make sure that I'm good for the client. Then I go out and I'm a recruiter for them. I find people that, you know, I believe they'd be attracted to, that they're compatible with based on our consultation and the interview that we've had. I also run a background check on them. And once I find someone, I send them over the profile. And I say, hey, you know, here's the person that I found for you. Here's their profile. Tell me what you think. And if they say, yes, I want to meet the person, I then send their pictures over to the person I found for them. And once they both say, yes, I want to meet the person, we then schedule an introduction.
So how does the introduction work? And are there do's and don'ts? Because Jasmine has some do's and don'ts that people never thought of before. So what's an absolute deal breaker?
You know what? And that has changed. Like, I'm always growing and I'm always learning. I used to be really big on the do's and don'ts, but I've actually pulled back on that. And here's why. Because when we create these boundaries where people are trying to fit what I want them to fit, or what even the person they're on a date with wants them to fit, they're not showing who they really are. I think that's how oftentimes people end up in these 6-month relationships, and they're like, wait, who is this person? Because you're not the person that I met 6 months ago, and now you're a completely different person. It's because you're showing the representative. So where I'm at now, what I think is working better for my clients is if you allow people to just be who they are. Instead of telling them what you want, instead of telling them who they should be, instead of you being the representative, just be yourself. Because the goal is not to just get married. The goal is not to just be in a relationship. The goal is to be happy and in a healthy relationship with yourself first, and then with someone else later. And so we have to be comfortable with who we are and allow people to be themselves so that we can say, hey, you know what? This was fun, but we're not compatible. But if you don't allow people to be themselves and you kind of give this like box that they have to fit in order to be in your world, they're going to pretend as long as they can because they want you, right? They'll pretend as long as they can. And then eventually this person pops out a year later and you're like, who is this person? This is not who you pretended to be 6 months ago. And so I think now it's more important that we just meet people where they are and allow them to be themselves and accept that everyone's not for us. We're not compatible with everyone. It doesn't make either of us good or bad. It's just important that you know who you're compatible with, allow people to be themselves, and when you're not compatible, move on to meet someone you are compatible with.
Are there some first date do's and don'ts? Because sometimes I think people go way too far on the first date.
You know what? In 2020, it's like, I would think so. There would be some perspectives and don'ts. Interesting things are happening. I've seen couples where they met online and were married in 3 months and they're still together 20 years later, right? And then I know couples that, were in a relationship for 5 years, got married, and were divorced within 2. So 5 years ago, you asked me this question, or even 2 years ago, if you asked me that question, I would have had a full list of do's and don'ts. But I think it's important to be yourself, right? If you're the type of person that's just going to go out and sleep with someone on the first night, then the person you're with should know that's the type of person you are. Go be with someone that wants a person like that, right? If you're the type of person that talks about politics on the first date, then you should be with someone who is going to accept that, who is going to be okay with that, because that's who you truly are. And so when we start saying, be this person on the first date, you miss out on really finding out who you're compatible with, because you want to be able to say, no, we're not on the same page. But you can't do that if you're both pretending to be the person that I'm telling you to be versus just being yourself.
So I was listening to one of the XM radio stations the other day, and they had this poll about who pays for what on the first date. And of course, guys say they expect the split, and then the etiquette books say the guy should pay for the first date. So how is that working? How does that work out?
Again, 5 years ago, you asked me this question, I would have absolutely said the man. And in my life, the man. But I know women who are offended if a man feels that he's supposed to pay, because then they believe it makes them seem like less valuable or that they can't do it themselves. I have a girlfriend who started a dating app for people who wanted to go Dutch. It's not for me, right? And so I'm also not going to ask a man on a date, right? Like in my relationship, the man is the leader of that relationship. So it goes back to being yourself. Be yourself. I think we spent so much time, and the world is different now because we valued family, I think, a little bit more, but people weren't really happy in those families. And now there's more of a push for people to focus more on self and being happy with themselves and loving themselves first. And I think we have to be open to that, because it allows people to have healthy relationships where they're not just there because they're supposed to be there, but they actually want to be there. And so if you're a woman who don't want men opening your doors, who don't want men paying for things for you, you feel like you can hold it down on your own, be with a man that wants that. And you're not going to know that if you go on the date and pretend to be someone else.
That's true. So now, how important is physical attraction?
You know what? From a man's perspective, I still find that men really place value on physical attraction, probably more than the other areas, especially a man that has options. He's going to definitely place value on physical attraction. I think, so here's the saying, right? People don't always like to hear this, but here's the saying. Men are measured by their money. Women are measured by their beauty. So I think when it comes down to a woman, the more beautiful she is, the more options she's going to have with men. When it comes down to men, the more money he has, the more options he's going to have with women. And that's just the reality. There are some exceptions to the rule, but when it comes to men, they're really going to care about the physical. When it comes to women, they will look over the physical for some other areas that might be important to them.
Okay, so that doesn't seem to have changed much. It always seems to have been that way.
That part hasn't changed.
Yeah, that hasn't changed much. So what can a man or a woman do to enhance their physical attraction?
Be the best version of themselves, right? I think that's different for all of us. I think very basic things like making sure that you're taking care of your skin, your hair, your nails for women. And when I say taking care, I don't mean you have to go pay and spend to get that done, but that you're putting things inside of you that's going to produce the results that you want. So you are drinking water, you're eating healthier foods, you are, taking care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the part that I think is really important. Well, I'll come back around.
Okay.
I think one, taking care of your body outside of just what you're eating, because that's important, but also making sure that you're active, right? I think in the social media worlds where we can see people all over the world, there's a lot of competition out here physically. And I think it's important that, especially with a lot of people working from home right now, get out, walk around if you can, get a treadmill in your home, do some of these online courses, but make sure that you are physically taking care of yourself so that you can improve yourself physically. But I think the most important part is know what you're trying to attract, right? I think this is where a lot of people miss out because I think that a lot of times we have this idea of who we want, and we just automatically assume that person is also going to be interested in us, right? But you have to think about their options. That's the part people don't think about. As a matchmaker, I think about that because when my clients come to tell me who they want to meet, I already know. When she says, I want a 6 foot tall man who makes 6 figures and looks like this and looks like that, in my head, I already know, girl, he has so many options, which is fine if you're going to beat all those other options out there. But if you are just, a woman that he can meet every day at the bus stop, or a woman he sees all the time, the chances of him seeing you and thinking, I want to give up all of my options for a woman that is considered average to him is not likely. Most people want that great catch, right? The same way that women want that great catch. So I think you have to be honest with yourself. If you're not one of those women that a lot of men are coming after, then you're probably not going to get the man that all the women want. Be honest with yourself about who you are and who you bring to the table from a physical perspective, and then you'll have a better experience dating because you're not just going after the people that don't want you back, or at least don't want you long term.
So, and that perfect man, 6'2" with a briefcase, 6 figures with a fancy car, what percentage of men are those? I remember once you gave us such a shocking percentage. It says, oh God, we're never going to meet that guy, right? What's the percentage?
When it comes down to the Black community, it's probably less than 1% when you put all of that together. But when it comes down to height, less than 14% of men are 6 feet or taller. The average height of a man is 5'9". So when I say 14% of men, I mean all men. Black men, white men, gay men, married men, whatever, men in this country, 14%. So just by saying that, you're limiting it. When we talk about 6 figures, there's only 10% of people in the country that are making that 6 figures range. So now you put those two percentages together, you already are dramatically dropping it down to an even smaller percentage. Now, when you say you want them to be Black, that's the other challenge there. So here's the thing, those men exist, especially in a city like Chicago, if you're in a city like DC, if you're in a city like New York. But those men have so many options. And if you are one of those women that you are 9 or 10 and you can pull men like that all day, then by all means, go get you one. But if you are not pulling men like that all day, sis, I need you to reconsider the height thing, because these men are probably not going to give up their options for someone they see all the time. They want to catch.
Since it's less than 1% of them. Want to be Black. Find him one first, right?
Yeah.
So what topics, are there any topics at all that should be off the table for the first date, that should be avoided? Any at all on the first date?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Let people know who you are. If you're the
Okay.
type of person who talks about wild and crazy stuff, show them that so they can determine if this is what they want. Because otherwise, that's who you are anyway. If that's what you want to do, that's who you are anyway. It's eventually going to come out that you're that type of person. This is how you carry yourself. And I'm not saying it in a positive or negative way, but it's eventually going to come out. So let people know who you are, and let someone choose you that wants to be with you and not the representative. Because if you give them the representative, 6 months later, they're gonna learn who you really are and decide that you're not compatible. I'd much rather you be yourself, whatever how crazy that is, and find someone that loves your crazy, that is open to your crazy, versus pretending and then hopefully thinking they're going to, never find out or agree with it.
Now, I always thought you should talk about a lot on the first date: religion, children, sex, all that kind of stuff, because it would be terrible to have 4 to 6 months in and you find out that you like to go to church, he don't, you're tired,
Right.
or he don't know what it means. Right. I just think it would be terrible.
And it's also
in that kind
interesting
of
to see.
time.
Yeah, it's also interesting to see people that have been married for years. I saw a video just the other day of a husband and wife. They have a podcast, and you could tell the guy was really upset because they weren't having enough sex for him, right? They're married now, and she is kind of like, well, I'm tired, and so on and so forth. But you could tell this was really important to him. So yeah, it's important. Have those conversations. What are your expectations? What's your sex drive like?
Mhm.
And let them know, like, hey, if you're not a every day or every other day, you're a couple times a month type of person, be honest, because it's going to just cause problems down the line if you're not having these conversations up front.
So where would you meet your first date? What have been some of the most exciting first dates you've heard about too?
Oh man, I think online probably provides the most interesting experiences because you just never really know what's going to show up in front of you. I think that's true. You never really know what's going to show up in front of you. You never know if the person's going to look like the person in the photos. You never know if they're going to be just a complete weirdo. You never really know about those experiences. So I think the stories that I've heard, that are the most interesting were online. I don't think from my clients I've had some crazy experiences where someone went out on a date. Well, actually, I take that back. There was one time I sent a couple. They were in New York. I introduced them. They were in New York, and the guy was socially awkward, and I wasn't able to pick up on it. I kind of picked up on it, but I thought maybe he was just nervous because you're talking to a matchmaker and they're interviewing you. But my client called me afterwards and she was like, was this a joke? And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, he didn't look at me the entire time because he was just like nervous and socially awkward. So the whole entire date, he looked and like she would talk to him and he was just like looking away from her. He liked her and wanted to get to know her, but he just didn't have the social skills to have a real conversation with her. So I think that was probably the craziest experience where she was like, luckily she wasn't mad at me because of the relationship we built, but she was definitely like, is this a joke? Like, are you pranking me right now? Because he never looked at her.
Gosh, so do you debrief after the first date to see how it went with the couples? You do it together, individually?
Absolutely. One of the things that I do to make sure that it's a no pressure introduction, because I want people to actually choose people. Let's not waste each other's time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I do after the introduction is I have both my client and the person I've introduced them to, I have them complete a survey. And that survey ultimately asks questions about their experience, what they like, what they didn't like, if they want to continue getting to know the person. It has them rate them on a lot of different areas of compatibility. And the reason for that is if for some reason you go on a date and you're like, I don't want to get to know them anymore. Like, it's, I'm fine. It was cool, but I'm over it. You don't have to tell the person that. The matchmaker tells them that. So I kind of remove that pressure off. So they don't exchange information after the introduction. I exchange the information. So they both come back, talk to me, they give me feedback, and then I say, you know, based on what they say, if they want to continue getting to know the person, we then exchange information. But if they don't, I let the other person know, like, hey, it wasn't a fit this time.
Oh, okay, that's pretty cool. So that everyone can be pretty relaxed and
Yep.
be themselves. So if they don't like, if they didn't like it, they
Right.
don't have, they're not the ones that say, hey, person I don't know, I'm going to hurt your feelings because I don't like it.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. You don't
That's
have to
pretty cool.
no pressure introduction. So my whole experience is like no pressure.
So, and that was our next question is, do you conduct post-date discussions? Cool. So when you do the post-date discussions though, do they help you find out a little more about what that person is looking for?
I think sometimes after on the post date discussion, I think sometimes I find out more about my client or the person that I'm introducing them to that they didn't share with me. And it allows me to even help them even more with future introductions. And that's the other part of the other benefit of getting that feedback, because I get to get the honest feedback, right? So if my client shows up on an introduction and they talk too much, or they talk about themselves too much, or they don't talk much at all, or they seem uninterested, I'm able to have that conversation with them and give them that feedback and say, hey, here's an area that was considered a negative, and let's talk about this. You know, this is something that might push people away, or you want to draw them in, so let's work on this. I even had a recent experience with that. Where I'd been working with this client for quite some time, and I got feedback from an introduction, and I said, hey, you know what? This is something you mentioned to me before, was like an area of insecurity, and it's playing out in your dates because this is the feedback that I'm getting. Let's talk about it. Yeah. So we'll do that.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Because a lot of times you don't know what to expect or how you come off to others, because we look in the mirror and we tell ourselves how wonderful we are every day, or at least we should. And so this way we know what piece of that wonderfulness needs to be adjusted. That's pretty cool. Okay, so in the dating process, when should you commit to be exclusive?
Um, so I think it's based on when both are ready, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you're compatible and both of you are ready. And again, I've seen successful marriages find that place of readiness in 3 months. And I've seen unsuccessful marriages try it for 5 years and figure it out and then divorce in a couple of years. So I think it really comes down to, one, are you compatible? So like, yeah, I get that it's fun now and it's exciting now and the chemistry is there now. But when the chemistry is not there, the areas that are most important to you, do you have those areas in common? That's the first part, if you're compatible. And if you're compatible, are you both at the same page? I think the challenge a lot of times is people end up dragging the other person to commitment or to marriage. And I think we have to get away from that, right? We should be with people that want to be in a committed relationship with us. Otherwise, you still need to be dating if they're not at the point to where they're ready to choose you and be with you. So I think it's about, one, stop pulling people, stop dragging them down the aisle, stop dragging them into being a committed relationship with you. It has to be a decision they make themselves so that they can make the commitment and hold their own selves accountable, because you can't hold them accountable. And make sure that you're compatible. So if you get to that place in 3 months, or if you get to that place in 3 years, I think it's about being at that place together. And that time frame can change depending on the couple.
So, what are 5 essential questions that should be asked during the first date? Because I know sometimes you can get so busy because the chemistry is working and you're having such a good time, you forget to ask the important questions about compatibility.
That's it. And the compatibility. So I'll use myself as an example. If I was out meeting someone and we were having a date, I know the areas of compatibility that are really important to me. Like, I'm Christian, so it's important that that person is also Christian. I am family oriented. That also has to be important. I'm entrepreneurial, so I don't believe in working a 9 to 5 for a 2-week vacation. They have to want to be able to build something long-term that gives us our freedom back. So that is important to me that most people will not even ever think about, right? They might not think about like 20 years from now, I don't want to have to work, until I'm 65 to retire. Like I want to work hard right now and create this freedom for myself a little bit earlier. Life goals, examples of that could be whether or not you want kids. That is a huge deal breaker that I think people wait too late to have that conversation. And also whether or not you want to be married. There's a new thing right now where there are a lot of people that are completely fine with a partnership or just companionship, but they don't want marriage. And you have to have that conversation as well. And also, what does marriage look like? Does that mean we go and get married and solidify like an official marriage, or are you one of those people that believe we're married because we've lived together and we don't need, a paper to tell that you're married? So I think, again, it goes back to the individual. Your job on that first date, outside of just being yourself and having a great conversation and getting to know that person and learning about that person, but you also want to learn if you guys are compatible. Because if you're not on the areas that are most important to you, what is the point of continually moving forward?
So how do you, the compatibility conversation, so you just bring it up and say, hey, how do you start that? Hi, I'm Christian, and that's important to me. What do you think about that? So how do you do that? Because some people would be kind of shy to ask that question of someone that they really don't know, but they've got to be on their best behavior. Because after all, they dressed up and they did all of their makeup and stuff, so they're looking cute. So, so what do you do?
So I think it's important to make sure that it's not an interview. And if you don't get to all of the areas, I think that's okay, right? But I think it's important that you are in the beginning having like real conversations. The other part is, if you're dating with an intention for long-term commitment and marriage, you can't be afraid of that. You can't be afraid of communicating what your intentions and your purpose, because a man who you're compatible with, who also is open to commitment and marriage, is not going to run from you just because you said this is what you want. We got to get out of that mentality of I'm going to sneak it in. I'm going to pull him to commitment. I'm going to pull him down the aisle. We got to stop doing that. It ends up in relationships to where they become resentful because they never wanted it in the first place, right? So I think you got to be comfortable having these conversations about who you are, because the person you're compatible with is not going to have a problem. So if you're talking about, the weekend or what do you do for fun, it's nothing wrong with saying, are you religious? Do you go to church? And if they're bothered by that question, they're not for you. And that's okay. It's perfectly fine. If you are serious about what you're looking for, there's nothing wrong with saying, okay, so, what are you looking for right now? If they are offended that you're asking a serious question, they don't want a serious conversation, and they probably don't want a serious relationship. That's what you want. You want to be able to identify whether or not this person is someone that you should continue investing your time in. Plus, also, I believe in dating multiple people at a time. So when you're dating multiple people, you're not so excited about this one person that you are trying to force it to work, because you just have to make this one work. When you're getting to know multiple people, you're hoping to see which one of these you're most compatible with, not forcing it with one person because you got options.
That's true. And the answer to our question is chemistry won out. So people believe chemistry is important. It's like, okay, well, let me know how that works.
It's so deceiving, because it'll make you think this person is for you until you learn things about them and you're like, absolutely not. The areas that are important to you tend not to be important. But you can develop chemistry with the person you're compatible with. You can't develop necessarily compatibility with the person that you have chemistry with.
Yes, it's so true. It's like the chemistry goes away.
Right.
You find out some things that are deal breakers. So
right, exactly.
So we have a question that asks, how do you choose a location for the first date? Are there any parameters around that, or?
I think that's a really good question. Again, my environment for my clients is no pressure. I don't set them up on these 5-star dinners and like all of that stuff, because people spend their time trying to focus on which fork to use, and are they sitting upright, and are you putting your napkin in your waist like you should, because now you have all this additional pressure of just like acting, having proper etiquette in this environment. I am a fan of coffee dates. I am a fan of ice cream dates. I am a fan of experiences, going for a walk if you feel safe with this person. I am a fan of simple dates that allow you to have conversation. I'm not a fan of bar dates, because you go there, you have drinks, and other sides of you that, it's not the real you because you're under the influence. So I'm not a fan of just going out and having drinks. I'm a fan of going, having a real conversation, seeing if you guys are compatible, if you even enjoy talking to the person. And I think that allows you to have a better experience and get to know someone.
Plus, you can see what they really like and look like, because there's no pressure to, you're right, no pressure to be overly dressed or use the right fork.
Right, exactly.
So what part of the relationship do you discuss finance?
Now this is an interesting one, because it's definitely very important. I think that it's how you discuss it.
Okay. Right.
I don't think asking a salary amount is necessary to find out about finance, but I think it's more so about how you discuss it. And this comes in the life goals part, right? Mm-hmm. So when you start to talk about what's important to you long term. Now, life goals, to give you an example, again, could be marriage, kids, starting a business, anything that you want to accomplish in life that's really important to you, that your partner has to be either a part of or supportive of. So those are your life goals. So I would ask questions about, what are some goals that you have, right? And there are ways that you can find out about that. People will say, oh, I want to purchase a home, or I want to, get out of debt, or I want, I would ask questions about that. And then also, like, if you're the type of person that's still looking to have children, or if you want to make some type of financial investments, start asking questions on their thoughts around that. You can learn from those questions where their head is at. So one thing, like if you're a woman who's like still, new to dating, and you're looking to meet someone, get married, have kids, start asking questions about, what type of schools they want their kids to go to, and do they understand the cost of those schools, and how do they plan on saving for that? Like, you ask questions in that way, I think, to kind of lead there. People will get offended if you ask their salary amount, and a lot of times men will start to think that, unfortunately, they'll start to think that you're just there for money. So I think you start to ask questions around how they plan on living their life in the future, which will then show you if they're even preparing for the future.
Okay, that's a great approach.
Yeah.
Are there specific questions that Black men ask about dating Black women?
Yeah.
Okay, enlighten us.
So they tend to want to know if she had a father growing up. So if she has a great relationship with a father. They tend to want to know, like, if she grew up in a 2-parent household, and if she has a great relationship with a father. They tend to want to know less about her career and income, and more about her character. Black men, specifically the ones that I work with, especially the successful Black men who already have their own money, they want their balance, their feminine energy balance. When you have a masculine energy man that's on the go, that is ambitious, and he has his everything together, he's not necessarily looking for somebody to help him build what he's already built, right? So they don't always place value on how successful she is or how educated she is. They want to know, is she sweet? Is she kind? They want to know, of course, if she's attractive, but is she also attractive on the inside? So I think Black men tend to look for more of that nurturing side, and they ask questions around that, because a successful Black woman comes a dime a dozen, right? Like, successful Black women are killing in education, we're killing it in our careers. So women like that come a dime a dozen. And I think for whatever reason, a lot of times successful men seem to feel like there is a clash between the masculine energy, one of the courses that I have and I'm working on is I help successful women to learn how to find that balance and bring out their own feminine energy so that you can still be successful in masculine energy at work, but finding the balance to bring out that feminine energy so that you can attract a masculine energy man because they need that balance. So those are the questions Black men are asking. They're asking, what's her relationship with her father? Because they want to know that she has a masculine man in her life and she's comfortable with masculinity. And then also, does she at least know how to access that nurturing side of her, the feminine energy, the sweet, the kind, the soft? What do you think?
I said, you know, I had a loving grandfather, loving uncle, loving brother. It's like, I don't know if they want to know the answer to that question. Let something go wrong, and they've got a set of instant enemies. I do understand that, you know, just overall, people need to balance the energy. So regardless to what sex you identify with, your energy could be either masculine or feminine. And in order to get a good balance, even to make good decisions, you do need a balance between masculine and feminine energies. Everyone has both. It's just that we use the ones that we need when we need them. And women have been forced into so that we have the power just to make the decisions in our own lives to develop more masculine energies. And sometimes the feminine energies don't play part. But when you think of the masculine energies, one is the intellect and one is the intuition. When you can combine both your masculine and feminine energies, you will have great experiences, great lives, great friends, more than you can imagine. So I encourage women to embrace both their masculine and feminine energies as well as men, because they're just energies and they do totally different things. It doesn't have a thing to do with your sexuality. It's that energy that is inside of you.
Yep.
So, yeah. So you can't have masculine energies everywhere because they bump. Same thing with feminine energies. They just bump into each other.
Yeah.
So that's nice. So we have, let me see. Do you agree, when you agree to meet, should the man pick her up at their house or should they meet at the place in separate cars?
So unless you know this person, I would definitely say go the safe route. It's too cheap to get an Uber, you know. If you don't want to drive, I would definitely say try the safe route. Take an Uber, meet them there. You know, it's just too much going on these days. I think, especially if you don't know this person or you don't know someone that already knows the person, go safe first. Get to know them, and then maybe allow them to like have that type of control where they can take you there.
I totally agree. And I'm probably a little more strict than Jasmine. And it ought to be in the daytime in a place you're familiar with in case they do something odd when you're there. You need to know where your car is or how you're going to get away. You need an exit plan these days. You just don't know. That representative can be sneaky sometimes.
Yep, and you should definitely have let a friend know where you are, share your location. I have a couple people who have my location at all times, you know, so share your location where people can know where you are. If you met them online, send a screenshot of the profile so that if anything happens, like there's enough information about you where the people who love you can help you.
Yes. And if something just doesn't feel right, don't question it. Just go with that gut feeling at that point, because you can always work it out later. Sometimes it's not that they're dangerous. Sometimes it's just that it wasn't the right time.
Yeah. You know? Yeah.
That's true. During COVID environment, how does one date when we have to have mask and distance? And because we're relationship creatures, so we're still going to seek relationships. So how do we manage that now that we've got the rules?
People are seeking relationships, and they're seeking them now more than ever because the world has been forced to stop.
Yes.
You know, and be that feminine energy where you just have to be. You
yes.
know, you can't just do all the time. You have to be. And I think people are finding that while being, they need companionship more so than they realized before, because they were able to fill their lives with doing. The great thing is you can still date during a pandemic. You just got to do it virtually now. Now is the perfect time to date online. I have not always been a fan of online dating. I'm definitely a fan of online dating now. But take advantage of the resources that are right here next to you. Facebook. Facebook has almost everyone on Facebook, you know. So I think a lot of people tend to be on Facebook and they don't accept friend requests from people they don't know. They don't really engage in the conversations on Facebook. I have made so many relationships from Facebook, whether professional or just friendships or whatever. And so take advantage of the resources that you're already using. Use it as an opportunity to build new relationships, whether that's romantic or platonic. And then date virtually first until you understand the habits of that person. So before you go and be around them, you want to make sure that, one, they're not out here just being, you know, around any and everyone, and they're being careful if that's important to you. So date virtually first and then see how they're living their lives. Are they safe? Are they, you know, still going to the clubs? Are they still going places where everybody's there with no mask on? That's probably someone that you shouldn't meet in person right now.
And if their background is a bookcase, ask them which one of those books they've read.
That's a good one too.
Yeah.
But you can, yeah, you can see, you know, what they're living like, what their background is, you know. So yeah, date virtually. There's a lot of free online dating sites that work, that absolutely work. You don't even have to pay for some of them, like Bumble or Coffee Meets Bagel, The League. There are so many great online dating options that you have. But the social networks that you're already using, you don't even have to start with something new. You're on Facebook. You know, be open, you know, be open and willing to meet people and willing to network and build relationships so that people can notice you and say, you know, I like what she's saying. Let me slide in those DMs.
If you tend to be more cautious, I know people are a lot of times because there's a lot going on. Jasmine's the perfect person to help you with that. And you can still meet your partners online and have your idea of your own coffee or share virtual, I don't know, cheesecake.
It'll have to be, look, and the thing is, it'll have to be virtual because at least in Chicago, the city was just shut back down today, I believe, starting Friday. So I think
I didn't realize there was a new shutdown.
we are no longer dining in. Everything has to be outside, and it's cold outside, so I can't imagine there's going to be any dining outside right now.
Okay.
So get your lighting together, get your computer together, or your phone together, because the virtual is the new world, at least for now.
Now, so when you're dating, what about red flags? And how do you know what red flag means to you? As my mother used to say, girl, it was red flags all over that. I don't know why you couldn't see it. So what are red flags?
We know. You identify red flags by believing who a person shows you and not who they tell you. You know, what they show you is what matters. If a person is not honest with you over the smallest things, chances are they're not going to be honest over the more difficult things. You know, if they show you up front, you know, they do not respect your time. So they schedule a particular time. You don't hear from them or see them until an hour from the time they were supposed to come pick you up. That was a red flag to show you how much they respect your time and honestly, how much they respect you. If they're not honest, pay attention to the relationships they have with the people around them. How do they treat their mom? How do they treat their sister? How do, you know, when you ask them about their past relationship, what do they say? Is there any accountability on their part, or do they just place the accountability on the other person? Like, have real conversations and pay attention to it and see what type of person they are. I think that the issue is not do we see the red flags and identify them? It's, are we going to listen to them when they're there? Because God always shows us the red flags. But what we do a lot of times, especially women, is we ignore them and we hope that it didn't mean what we thought it would mean. And then 6 months later, you're like, what? Your mom is like, you saw those red flags though, you know? So I think it's not as much of how do we identify them? Because we see them. It's listening to them and accepting it for who it is. You know, I think women have to stop dating with the scarcity mentality of, I just got to get this one. Men date like there's plenty of fish in the sea. If they're not compatible with someone, they will immediately move on. Men don't wait around and try to allow you to force them, you know, they don't wait around to see if they can, you know, find something good about you. When a man realizes that you're not what he's looking for, he moves on. And I think women have to take that same approach to dating.
And I've got one last question. What's your perspective on dating younger women? The man is 60 and the lady is 40.
I think that's fine. I think that's absolutely fine. As long as it depends. Again, it depends on the reason why. You know, if he's dating younger women for the sake of he believes that younger women are somehow better than women his own age, I think when men take that approach, they tend to get used by younger women because there are younger women who are waiting on a guy who thinks like that. If you happen to just meet somebody that's younger and y'all, you know, hit it off and you're compatible, then that's fine. But if you are dating younger women because your intentions come from a bad place where you somehow believe that women your own age are not not good enough for you, you think you're going to find something with younger women, know that there are younger women who wait and look for men like that so that they can take advantage of those guys. So just be mindful of your intentions and where it's coming from.
Yeah, a lot of times people do think that older men do tend to think women their age are too needy or they need them to be taken care of. And then you're right, then they choose younger women and then that woman's waiting for that. But I think we need to get back to what Jasmine said was most important was compatibility too. And not chemistry, because sometimes when you have that age difference, man, that chemistry is going on. You're feeling and doing stuff you haven't felt and done in years, and that's chemistry. But what about children? What about money? What about relationships? What about sex? What about those kinds of things that you're compatible with? And we don't need to forget about that.
Right. Yeah.
Well, we're coming to the end. It's always great to talk to you. I just have 1,000 questions and you're just so wonderful to talk to. So we're going to have to not let it be a year and a half before we talk again.
Oh, yeah. We'll definitely have to do it again soon.
That's right. So what are your closing statements here? What's your closing bit of advice?
Closing bit of advice is know your areas of compatibility. So know what's important to you and be yourself. Be honest with who you are. And be with the person who is going to love who you are and not that representative, right? So those are my closing statements. I would say also I have a podcast on Spotify, Apple, iTunes, and Google Play. It's called Dating Done Right with Jazz. Find that podcast. You can also find my site at blackmatchmade.com.
Okay, remember that podcast is Dating Done Right. And it sounds like wherever you get your podcast from, be sure you get that one. And what's your website again?
Website is blackmatchmade.com.
Right. So I want you guys to share Jasmine's information freely because I'm sure she's going to help to a lot of us and for advice, not only for ourselves, but for our children, for people who are close to us, because that compatibility thing is key. So as we close this segment, I want to ask everyone to be inspired and to further notice. I want you to celebrate everything and do not go gently into that good night, but find a heel worth dying for and take it. Be the person that you're waiting for and make today so awesome that yesterday gets jealous, and above all else, do it your way. I'm Stephanie Wilson-Coleman, the Empowerment Doctor, and remember, life is too short to drink cheap champagne. Have a great life. Bye now.
Bye.
But life's too short to drink cheap champagne. I decided to buy me